Things about our show is it's going to be unique.
You are what you do. You can say any amount of things that you want to say, but what you do is what everybody sees.
People are like, "Oh, I'm just going to JV it." Like, it's just JV it. Like, what the hell does that mean?
I cannot tell you how excited I am to hang out with you guys today. So thank you so much.
Well, then that end buyer could come back and say, "Well, I didn't fully understand that it was subject to."
That's not a thing. Like, the SEC has thought of all of these things. They've been here since 1932.
And you can do what you want with your property.
Buyers have time, they have negotiating power, they have options.
Oh my gosh, I am blown away by your inexperience, and they've been in business 20 years.
And that includes things other people put on your property, right? It's your property that'll be okay. Suddenly, Cousin Jimmy's in a lawsuit.
A novation is replacing one contract or one obligation with another.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Yes.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Today, we are talking about building a real estate business through effective communication. I'm Andy Fowler, and I'm here with Sean St. Clair. If you're new to the show, make sure to like our channel. You can find us on Facebook, and you can find us on YouTube. On YouTube, we are at NREM Podcast. That is at NREM Podcast. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who has our legal update.
Thank you, Andy. So today I'm starting what I'm going to call my What If series. So I'm constantly asked by clients, or I'll be at a networking event and somebody will come up to me and say, "What if?" And it's always, "What if this?" or "What if that?" Type of thing. And so today is my first of our What If series. And so the legal update today is, what if the seller files for bankruptcy after the closing of a subject to transaction? So the existing loans remain, buyer purchases it, and thereafter the seller ends up in bankruptcy. What happens in that case? So a couple of things to understand about a bankruptcy filing is that the minute a bankruptcy is filed, the assets no longer belong to the person that files for bankruptcy. They're allowed to possess certain assets, to use certain assets, but ultimately those assets technically belong to the trustee of the bankruptcy estate, and they have control over those assets. And the bankruptcy trustee then makes determinations on what assets to keep and what assets to sell, or even under certain circumstances, what contracts to adhere to and what contracts to allow to be breached or to do away with. So in the case of a creative finance transaction or a subject to transaction that's closed and bankruptcy is filed, the first question you have to ask is, when was the filing? If the filing was within 90 days of the closing of the transaction on the creative financing, then the trustee has the ability to come in and argue what's called a voidable preference, which means, hey, you and the debtor entered into a transaction within 90 days of them filing for bankruptcy. And therefore, during that 90-day period, any contract within that 90 days that's performed within those 90 days, that is considered a voidable preference. And the bankruptcy trustee can immediately set aside that contract and unwind it, where the property in that case would go back to the seller to be held or controlled by the bankruptcy trustee. And the buyer would be out. They would be returned whatever funds that they put into the transaction. So if they're out of pocket and they've paid the mortgage and things like that, they basically put the parties back in the status quo, back to where they were before the contract was entered into. And the bankruptcy trustee can do that. So if there's a property that's not subject to a homestead exemption, and there's equity there that the bankruptcy trustee wants, they could set aside that transaction if it was within the 90-day period, and then they could take over that property and sell that property and pull out the equity for the purposes of the bankruptcy estate. If it was after the 90-day period, the bankruptcy trustee generally does not have that power unless there was some form of, insider negotiation, some form of fraud or impropriety involved. But otherwise, if it were just a straight arm's length transaction, the bankruptcy trustee generally would not have the ability to set aside the contract. Instead, If it was a subject to transaction where, and my recommendation is always on subject to transactions to do a wrap. So you give the seller a promissory note, even if it's only for performance, which means I'm going to pay your mortgage payment for you. And then you secure that by a mortgage or deed of trust against the property. Well, in that case, the seller has now become a lender. So when they file for bankruptcy, the promissory note is actually an asset of the bankruptcy estate. And in that case, the trustee can choose to do something with the note, to hold the note, to sell the note, or they could return the note to the seller and say, okay, there was no value with this note. So seller, you have the note and you can continue to be the lender and it's not affected by the bankruptcy. So on the what if the seller files for bankruptcy after a subject to transaction is completed? To answer that question is number one, if it's filed within the 90 days, or if the contract is performed within the 90 days of filing, the bankruptcy trustee can come in and unwind the transaction. If it's after the 90 days, generally the contract will not be impacted or affected. And the only thing that you have to look out for is whether or not the bankruptcy, the only thing in that case that's to be done is to figure out if the bankruptcy trustee is going to sell the note to somebody else because the note has value, or if the bankruptcy trustee is going to return the note to the seller, and then you just continue to pay the mortgage payment on the existing loans. The last caveat on that, though, is the bankruptcy filing could invoke a due on sale clause because the lender is going to receive notice of the bankruptcy filing because the debtor is still a borrower under the original loan. And in that case, the lender could come forward and invoke the due on sale clause. But it's the risk that you run when you do a subject to transaction. It really doesn't change. That risk doesn't change because of the bankruptcy. It's just another thing that could potentially trigger that due on sale clause. Generally, the lender will not invoke the due on sale clause, will not pursue foreclosure as long as the payments are being made, but that's not definite. But that's another risk. I will tell you that the subject to addendum that I prepare for my clients states in there that the seller will reaffirm that existing loan so that hopefully that there will be no due on sale clause. There won't be any issues by the bankruptcy. And reaffirming basically says, hey, I understand that loan is out there and I'm going to reaffirm it. I don't want it to be impacted or affected by the bankruptcy filing. So that's it. It's somewhat complicated. Hopefully it never happens. But what if a seller files for bankruptcy post closing on a subject to transaction? There's the analysis.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, the bankruptcy courts be prepared to enter into a new world in how they do that. But as Sean mentioned, he tries to plan for that by requiring the reaffirmation of the debt. I think it would be interesting and maybe a topic for another show. What happens to that agreement where you agreed to reaffirm the debt and everything else and everything else, but control what you can control now and deal with what you have to deal with then in the event of bankruptcy. All right. With that, let's get into some news and some updates for the NREM podcast. The Creative Finance Symposium that we've been doing, we're giving it a new name and rebranding and doing something a little bit different. We're going to be calling it the Creative Finance Symposium. I'm sorry, that's what we did call it. We're calling it the Creative Finance Collective. And what this is really meant to be is a discussion with professionals like Sean and I, as well as other professionals throughout the country who are knee-deep in creative finance, who know the inner workings, who are exploring the inner workings from state to state on how this goes, and to provide an open forum of discussion to both the professionals as well as the viewer, you, who want to learn about creative finance and have, more importantly, questions about creative finance to be able to be answered by professionals in the field that know what they're doing. The first one we're going to do is going to be Wednesday, May 24th at 5:00 p.m. We're going to have our first guest in that. And when I say guest, it's really not a guest, but really a co-participant, and that's Alan Seschker. You all will be familiar with Alan. He's been on the show on 2 separate occasions. He is very experienced in wrap transactions. In fact, he has an entire university called Wrap University. He devotes a lot of his time to educating and training on how to appropriately do a subject to transaction using wrap. So he's going to participate in that. And then we'll be on hiatus and really launch the full extent and scope of the Creative Finance Collective beginning in July. So you'll hear more information about that as the time approaches, and how you can participate and become a member of it, and learn and get your questions answered. The topic we're going to be talking about is advanced legal issues for subject to wrap financing transactions. Sean, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to jump in and talk a little bit about Wrap University. Alan's been a good friend of the show, and he has just rolled out an online version of Wrap University where, you don't have to go and appear in person and take the course in person. I actually have taken it. I appeared in person. I flew to Dallas and attended it in person. It was awesome. I would highly recommend it for anybody doing creative finance. You should attend this program. But he has an online version now where you can attend it in the comfort of your home, and definitely something to check out, because in my opinion, he is, one of the preeminent wrap attorneys, creative finance attorneys in the nation. And anything you can learn from him, you should.
Yeah, for sure. Just because he's in Texas does not mean that you in Arizona or you in Colorado or wherever you are that isn't Texas can't learn something. Like Sean says, he's been to the university. And as we've discussed on multiple occasions, I know you've mentioned this on a number of occasions, we don't, as a general rule, recommend doing a subject to transaction that isn't some form of a wrap deal. So we place a high importance on understanding that process, what that looks like transactionally, and how best to go about doing that. All right. So for today's show, we wanted to mention as well, we are, like all shows, taking questions in the final 15 minutes of the episode. So if you have questions, make sure to give those to us. And I'm going to turn it over to Mayu here, who can give you instructions on how is best to go about doing that.
Thank you, Andy. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the show live. If you've joined us before, then you know that we will be taking questions at the end of the show. So whether you're watching us from Facebook pages or from YouTube, we are monitoring the chat for your questions so that we can take the last 10 to 15 minutes of the show to answer them. Today's topic, as you've heard, is building a real estate business through effective communication. So we take questions in order of priority. So don't wait. If you have a great question in mind related to today's topic, make sure to leave it in the live chat, as specific as you can be, and we'll try to get to all of the questions at the end. So with that, let's get into our topic today. Andy?
There you go. And as Mayu mentioned, you don't have to wait. If you think of the question now, go ahead and plug it in there and we'll get to it. All right. Today we're talking about building a real estate business through effective communication. And with us to discuss that topic, we have real estate investor Brent Daniels. Brent.
Hey,
thanks
excited to be here, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for
Andy,
being
Sean,
here.
you guys are absolutely incredible, and we're gonna have a lot of fun in the next 45 minutes.
For sure. We really appreciate you taking the time out to talk with us about what you do, real estate investing and communication. So we mentioned it. You're a real estate investor. Tell us how you became involved in real estate. What got you into the business?
Yeah, listen, you at some point we all crossed the what's been referred to as the Purple Bible. I don't know if that's sacrilegious or not, but the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and that really opens up the mind and really just kind of puts you on a different path. You know, you read that and you're like, oh, okay, well, I want to be an entrepreneur. I have this pilot light inside me that says that I want to have more control over what I do professionally. So real estate seems like an incredible vehicle to be able to do that. So that's what happened to me as a mushy-brained 21-year-old. I read that book. My best friend Mike Mahoney gave it to me, and I mentioned that because he's in the room down there. We still do business together, and he's a partner of mine. But I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. We both read it, and instantly went and signed up for real estate licensing school. Got a real estate license when I was a summer during college, and then became a real estate agent with the intention of being a investor, and took the long path there. Discovered that really building a healthy, long-lasting real estate business comes down to having conversations with property owners and making offers. I think if you boil it down to those two things, conversations and making offers, you can be really wildly successful as a real estate entrepreneur and build a business that at some point you could pull yourself out of, that'll truly be a servant to you and not you be a servant to it. And that's what I think is so excited about being a real estate entrepreneur.
So, Brent, you've had an opportunity for a little while now to get your hands dirty in real estate. And
Yep.
You've been involved, I take it, in a number of real estate investment strategies. Do you have a favorite?
Wholesaling.
Wholesaling.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even real estate investing technically, but I mean, it is sourcing, finding discounted properties or finding really great opportunities. And you saw as the market shifted, there's more creative finance opportunities, which I'm really excited about. The Creative Finance Collective. That's a really cool name, and I think necessary in our industry. But you see it more and more as the market isn't, shooting straight up. You see more opportunities for some creative finance deals, which is exciting, and you can wholesale those as well. But I've done flips, I've done buy and holds, I've done Airbnbs, I've done traditional long-term rentals. Kind of done it all in that respect. And what I really enjoy is building a wholesaling business, taking those funds and then lending that money out and being the bank on on some really cool deals here in Phoenix.
So we'll get into the other things you're doing, but since we're talking about wholesaling, just curious, because you're the guy in the industry doing it, how has your strategy changed, or has it changed at all as the market went from the 2021 highs, the kind of what we went through in 2022 and to now? It seems like you've been able to manage the shift one way or the other in terms of wholesaling.
Yeah, the interesting thing as markets shift, it just depends on you really understand that the buyer determines value. And I think that's kind of a mystery to a lot of people as they're getting started. They're like, well, does the seller determine value? Does an appraisal determine value? Does the government determine value? Do real estate agents or brokers determine value? And you see when the market shifts and interest rates go up, it's really a ready, willing, and able buyer determines the value because there's less buyers out there. And so when you saw that shift or kind of the squeeze in the economy that we went through in the third quarter of last year, you saw that the buyers that stuck around really had control over what they were buying. So you had to actually be nice to them. You had to communicate even more effectively with them. You couldn't just, send out a list of properties and not communicate with your buyers. You had to talk to them and get them really good deals. And that's what shifted. Before you could throw out anything. You could throw out anything and there would be a buyer for it. But as interest rates increase, the buyer pool decreases. And so you have to build long-lasting, real relationships with cash buyers or investors that you work with.
Brent, tell us about Wholesaling Inc. What is it?
Yeah, Wholesaling Inc. started out as a podcast, similar to this, right? A podcast and a YouTube channel. Tom Kroll came into this business. His older brother, stepbrother, Todd Toback, had been doing it for a long time, since the early 2000s. And Tom had gotten fired and needed something to do and wanted a change in his life and learned. Him and Todd did a podcast, a 90-day challenge to get Tom his first deals and to get him out of the hole he was financially. And they documented this whole thing. And this is back 2012, 13. I mean, there was not a lot of podcasts at the time. So it really exploded in popularity. And then from that, Tom started his own podcast where he'd interview people that were doing real deals out there and finding, how did you find that deal? Putting them in the hot seat. How did you negotiate it? What did you say to this property owner? What was the problem they were going through? To really, to really break down and give instruction to people out there to be able to go and find really good deals. And I thought that was really interesting. And something that I learned from Tom was, if you're doing a podcast, if you're doing a YouTube channel, if you're coaching, there's education and there's instruction. And then there's entertainment, which is a whole different thing. But if you can put 80 to 90% of your information and what you're putting out there is instruction, people really sink their teeth into it and become raving fans. And that's what happened. And now we have the biggest podcast in the wholesaling space.
Very cool. So communication is obviously a big part of what you do. Tell us about TTP.
Yeah. Talk to people. I mean, that was like, you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, it like tells you, okay, you should do this, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. You know what I mean? And I was literally this morning, guys, watching old videos of Dolph DeRoos and Robert Allen and Robert Kiyosaki, and they're kind of doing it. It's kind of gimmicky, right? They're kind of going on appointments and doing stuff. They don't really show you how to go find the deals. They're like, just make a bunch of offers for properties that are on the market. Well, we know that if it's a really hot market, you're not going to get those deals. You're just not. It's going to get bid up and they're not going to turn into really great deals. So you have to go off market. So how do you go off market? Well, you just literally, you could drive in any neighborhood, in any city, in any state around the country, and you can find properties that need renovation. You can find properties that need some love. And what you do is you just simply find a way to communicate, have a quality conversation with that property owner, and you keep stacking that up and time and doing that time in and time out, and you're going to find amazing opportunities. And that's how you get started in this business. And so when it comes to talking to people, either they're calling you or you're calling them. So if you don't have a budget, which is called marketing, for them to call you through pay-per-click, through direct mail, through newspapers or billboards or reputation or whatever else, then what are you going to do? How do you get started in this business? How do you go and find really great opportunities? If the MLS is really super competitive and you don't have a marketing budget, then you have to go and be proactive. And so you can either pick up the phone and call people, or you can go and knock on their door.
So let's look at this from the perspective of somebody who's been watching your podcast and they think, man, I'm seeing all these folks making life-changing wealth. They seem like they're enjoying what they're doing. I really want to get into this.
Mm-hmm.
I love this idea of wholesaling. I love what Brent's doing, but I'm starting from scratch. So this stuff all is just assumed by Brent because he knows it and lives it, bleeds it. But
sure,
for the person who's just starting and building their business, what would you suggest to them? How do they need to start thinking about communication, and what kind of things do they need to start thinking through in order to develop that business, knowing that the deals aren't just going to just fall into their email inbox and just be given to them?
I love it. I love that. What a great question. Number one is you got to find your tribe. I truly believe that. You got to find people that are doing this. You got to find people that have community. You got to find people, whether that's going to local meetup groups, going to RIAs, real estate investing associations, whether that's finding a group online, something that Pace Morby and Jamil Damji and myself do every Monday is try to build a community through our live show that we do on our YouTube channels and our podcasts. And you got to find people doing this. You got to find, because it's going to really activate and give you confidence that you can go out and do this. When you see other people doing it and you see them like changing their lives in real life, it's not a video, it's not an audio, it's nothing. It's real people that you're seeing doing this. It changes everything. It gives you confidence that you can do it. The second is you got to figure out what model you want to follow. What model do you want to follow? Do you want to go directly to a property owner? Do you want to build relationships with real estate agents? Do you want to go and raise funds and just become a property flipper? What model do you want to follow? So if you have a community and a tribe and you have a model, then that's when you start putting in the work, right? That's when you start going out there and taking action every single day and building up your communication skills. And really, when you're speaking with a property owner, there's four main things that you're trying to discover to see if you can provide any value to them as a real estate investor. The first one is the condition of the property, right? How much work does this property need? The second one is, what's their timeline? When do they want money for this property? When do they want to sell it? Have they made the decision that they're going to sign a document transferring title to somebody else? Have they made that decision, right? Or are they just kind of, well, if the right offer comes along, you tell me what it's worth, that type of thing. It's probably not the greatest lead. The third is motivation. What is their problem? What is their problem that a cash offer or creative offer will solve? And then the fourth one is, what price do they want? How much do they want for the property? So every conversation, if you understand that you're trying to understand these four things, then you could use that as a scaffolding for a really good, what we call quality conversation. It's not that you're just, kind of throwing out things and building kind of fake rapport and not really getting anywhere, letting the conversation spiral out of control. You have specific things that you're trying to discover so that you can see if you can be of service to that property owner.
Now, Brent, you mentioned choosing the model is an important piece early on. And one thing I will say that we've just run into over and over again, and you've just explained this and hit the nail on the head, but the importance of being out there and meeting people, meeting those who have done it before. And it almost seems counterintuitive, and I don't know what it is, but we've all been kind of raised that if you tell too many people about this thing you're doing, that the opportunity is going to get lost.
Sure.
You're going to miss out on it. You're missing out on big money. And by making an island of yourself, I think you end up really being the one that misses out. And constantly, as we've gone to these things, almost everybody that we've met or interviewed has had the same thing. You got to meet the people, and you have to really find mentors in the space. And so where I'm going with this is, and kind of choosing the model that is going to fit you. Is that something that you work through with mentors ahead of time and get your hands dirty a little bit just to see what you like? How best do you find to kind of pick the model?
Yeah, I think you should trust your instincts on a lot of this, right? You hear somebody, you feel something, they're doing something that you think is exciting to you. It's very personal. So you have to you have to have some instinct about what you're trying to do. I think if you build a base of being able to find the deals as your foundation for everything else, then you don't have to necessarily pick one or the other right away. You just start with just finding deals, and then decide if you want to be a flipper, then decide if you want to own a big portfolio, then decide if you want to be the bank, then decide if you want to be a developer. But it starts with get proof of concept. You know what I mean? Get some income coming in from your efforts when it comes to this business. I mean, I think it's weird, right? You're 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 or 22. And then all of a sudden you're thrust into the world, and you're like, hey, go provide value. Go do something, right? And you don't really have skills yet. You don't really know what you're supposed to be doing. So you just kind of pick something and really try hard at it to be good at it. And then from there it develops, and you build an actual business. So I think that if you're just starting out and you're interested in being a full-time real estate entrepreneur, go have conversations with people that own ugly houses or that are in ugly situations, and go solve those problems and build from there. So I think from a model standpoint, one, it depends on where you're at, right? But two, go source deals, have some avenue to be able to find great opportunities. And if you do that, you're going to build a really strong foundation for the future.
What's an example of the most unique way that you've ever acquired a property? I've heard stories of people meeting, folks at the market or restaurants or, and it's like,
Sure.
What? How did you do that? What's a unique example of a unique way that you actually acquired a property?
There was this house that was on a curve of a neighborhood that I was door knocking. And at the time I was 1 foot in real estate agent, 1 foot in being a wholesaler. So I wasn't really sure which approach to go. And it was a family, and they were moving stuff out into the carport. And and kind of clearing out the house. It looked like they were having like an estate sale type of thing. So I went in and was just having a conversation with them about what their plans were with the property. They were going to fix it up. They were going to list it with an agent. They were going to just find an investor for it. They're all over the place, right? They really didn't have a plan. And so, just sitting down with them and just understanding, okay, what is the best exit strategy for you on this property, and really understanding what their financial needs were at the time. They really need to pay off a lot of attorney fees and medical fees and all these things. And it turned out that just a cash as is offer was the best plan for them to be able to accomplish all those goals of paying off all their bills and have money in their pocket and not have to deal with contractors and trying to figure out how to redesign this property. But it just came from me like walking down in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? I was just walking around and I was kind of done for the day. It was kind of dusk and I was like, you know what, I'm done. I'm hungry, whatever. I've been sweating all day in Phoenix. And it was just that last conversation that I had. And I spent a couple hours with him that first time. It's just, you never know. I mean, if you're being proactive, you never know when that conversation is going to hit. And it turned out to be a really great deal for us and for the investor that we sold it to. But it's just from walking around in a neighborhood. You know what I mean? No budget, no real plan. No, I mean, kind of a goal for the day to have a good conversation with the property owner, but just, it was like serendipity. You know what I mean? And it's crazy how often that happens.
Well, and what's interesting in the way you describe that is really cool, because a lot of times, and granted, investors have to feed their families, they have to make money, whatever. But a lot of times people think that they have to have results. And the goal is the result, but that really shouldn't be the result. The goal should be the process. So, you just said,
100%.
I went to this neighborhood to have a good conversation. A lot of investors would say, well, I went to this neighborhood to find a house. No. You went to have a good conversation. And if the house comes, it comes, but you were respecting the process of going and having those good conversations, and those good conversations then lead to the results, if that makes sense. That's really cool.
If you have enough conversations and make enough offers, you win.
Right.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean, you just do. And then the beautiful thing is maybe the offer that you make, maybe cash isn't the right offer for them. Maybe something creative is a better option for them. Well, then you just find somebody that's really good at creative deals and you bring them into the deal and you split it, right? You squat up. Right. And that took a long time to really understand and really, find different people that were experts in that and that would want to, work a deal together and see the long-term plan of the relationship that we can have, as opposed to, oh, let me just take this deal and I'll just pay you like a bird dog fee or a finder's fee. You know what I mean? Like that was, I felt like that was like the first half of my experience in this business was like, oh, let me just take it. You don't understand it. I'll just give you a bird dog fee. And then all of a sudden, like, I think just through shows like this, YouTube podcast, I mean, people got more confident and in communicating with other people that know things that they don't know. And if this person doesn't want to do a deal with me, fine. I've got a whole group over here, a whole Facebook group that'll do it. So it's powerful. I think right now is the best time to be a real estate investor.
Brent, there's a tendency, I think, in folks that are watching on things like YouTube. They watch you and, you've had a ton of success in this. And when we talk about communication, boy, this just sounds easy. Why wouldn't I do it? But I'm not sure it's easy at all. Conceptually, it's easy. Sure. But I think people sometimes forget communication's a craft. And a skill and something that has to be honed and developed. The same is true about being a lawyer. They don't teach you everything you need to know in law school. In fact, most of being a lawyer isn't taught in law school, and it's learned through a practice over and over and getting that. So realistically, you mentioned kind of 4 pillars of what it takes in communicating with a buyer, a potential buyer. How much time do you think realistically, and what should somebody do to hone that craft? Is it just rogue, hey, just get out there and communicate? When you start, it's going to look ugly, but as you work on this, it's going to get better?
Massive imperfect action. For sure. It's a skill. I mean, Andy, it is a skill and it's something that you develop, but I didn't have it. I didn't order my own food at a restaurant until I was like 13. You know what I mean? I wasn't that dude like going door to door selling the candy bars. I gave the box to my dad to sell at work. You know what I mean? Like it, but it was something that I knew that I had to develop. So I started just door knocking because I didn't have a budget. And that really helped me to understand what I should be asking and how to approach a conversation and how to like interrupt somebody's day. That's essentially what we're doing, is interrupting people's day, and just understanding that most people are going to reject us, but there's going to be some people that have their head in the sand that, could really use us to interrupt and kind of jump into their life. And that's really what we're looking for. And that throws off a lot of people because our tribal brain is like, well, don't get kicked out of the tribe. Don't be that nuisance. You know what I mean? Don't go and talk to too many people, because most people are going to reject you. But once you get past that, once you understand that there are people that do want you to help them out, that do want you to jump into their day, then you focus on that. And that's really the main goal of it, is not just, I'm going to get beat up by all these people that are going to reject me. It's just going and having conversations and finding the people that'll actually do business with me. And you find that with that focus in mind, that's what you find, And so I always say, I think every real estate entrepreneur, every business owner should talk to 1,000 strangers about what they do. And if you have true conviction, not just like, oh, I want to be okay at this. Oh, I'm real passionate about this. That's a flash in the pan. I get passionate about stuff all the time that never ends up, doing anything. But if you have real conviction to be a real estate entrepreneur and you're not starting out, with a bunch of funds that you can go and invest in long-term assets, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You got to be brave. You got to have that courage. You got to go and you got to grow and change. And that hurts. Change hurts. Growth hurts. There's growing pains for sure. But once you talk to 1,000 people, it's incredible what it does for your life, because then you could talk to anybody about anything. You know what I mean? And once you understand that your tone of voice is your body language when you're on the phone, you understand what to say. You understand how to overcome objections. You understand how to answer questions and then ask questions. You understand how to actively listen. Then you build those skills. And I feel like that's like your software. I'm reading this great book called the Maui Millionaires, and they talk about your wealth operating system, and your hardware is kind of like what you grew up with. What was wealth talked about when you were like 0 to 18? What was the group? What was that? That's kind of like your hardware, but your software that gets updated are the people that you hang out with now and the skills that you develop, right? And so if you're hanging around people that are doing amazing things and you're not doing amazing things, they're not going to hang around with you. So you gotta go find, again, that tribe, that community, hang around them, see what they're doing, and then just follow that model. It's already done.
So we've talked about effective communication to basically get your foot in the door, to, put a property under contract. How does effective communication come into play once you have that contract in place, taking that contract from execution to closing and dollars in your pocket? How does communication fit into that?
Right. So in real estate, there's 3 parts: lead generation, conversion of those leads, and then exit strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the conversion is kind of sales, right? Lead
Right.
generation is kind of marketing, sales, and fulfillment or exit strategy on this. And so you get to decide, are you going to buy and hold it? There's only 3 exit strategies, really: buy and hold it. Are you going to buy it and flip it? Or are you going to assign your right to purchase that? And so you just decide. It's a case by case, depending on where you are at in your business and what's going on with that property, what you want to do. For instance, we locked up a deal in Chandler, Arizona, which is a very popular area, on Friday. and the seller's getting real wiggly with it, right? They're kind of throwing out signs that they might want to cancel, or they've got another investor was kind of pouring some honey into their ears, telling them that they can give them more and they could do, we should be able to close faster and all these things. And what we typically do is we typically put it to our cash buyers, assign that deal, make an assignment fee. But with this particular seller, we're just going to close it. We know that he needs his money, and we dug deeper today, this morning, literally, and found out that he has to pay some probate attorneys on a different deal that he's inheriting. And so it's really a lot of pressure on him to get that deal closed and to pay the attorneys. And so that's why he wanted to close faster. So we're able to just give them the cash, close on it, and then we'll flip it later, either on the market or to our cash buyers, as opposed to assigning it. So it's case by case, but typically we'd lock it up and sell the contract.
And that deal would have gone south, but for your guys' communication, you would have ended up either B, eventually closing after paying a bunch of attorney's fees to enforce the contract, or having to just cut your losses and walk away. But instead, you guys went and actually had a conversation saying, why are you getting buggy? Right. What's going on? What's driving this? And now you're able to, close the transaction where an investor who just kind of gets it under contract, starts looking for the cash buyer, never talks to the seller again, never follows up, never has those hard conversations, that transaction goes south, and, they're going to struggle to close it.
Yeah. And something that's super easy to do, like right away, is how about going through all your text messages and responding to them? You know what I mean? It is shocking to me how many entrepreneurs have like 400 unresponded to text messages, right? And it's the same thing with these property owners. You need to communicate. 80% of the time, they're not going to respond to you. When you text them, when you call them, when you leave a voicemail, but you keep communicating with them. And that's how you keep people in the transaction. That's how you make sure that they understand that things are going smooth. They know what to expect next. It's when you just like lock up a property and then never talk to the property owner or the agent that's representing them, when things start getting a little bit like, wait, are they closing this? Are they real? Are they going to hit me for like a huge price reduction or some different huge change to the way that they're buying this property? That's when you have problems. But if you just overly communicate with property owners and the people that represent them, typically it goes really smooth.
Yeah. From a legal perspective, we talk about this a lot on the show, given that it's kind of a legal show, but whether it's wholesaling or some form of a subject to transaction, disclosures are such an important piece of this and in some states it's even more of a big deal. But given that it's like, well, regulation is coming, so just be prepared for it. If you're effectively communicating, disclosures shouldn't even be an issue. You should be golden.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I mean, we use Sean's purchase contract. You know what I mean? It's fantastic. So, I mean, it over communicates. It's absolutely the best contract that I've ever seen. And people are like, oh, how could you use this contract? A seller will never sign it. They'll never go through with it. They do every time. We explain exactly what's going on. They're fine because we've already communicated it with them. It's when you like go in and you're trying to like be something that you're not, that you have problems when it comes down to getting the paperwork or the agreement signed. When you're promising something over here that's not happening in the actual paperwork, but the paperwork's just a breakdown of what we've already talked about.
Right.
It's awesome.
Well, and some of your best liability protection is communication, right? People are less inclined to want to sue or file complaints against, or, say bad things about people that they like and treat them well. And in the legal realm, most bar complaints arise out of a lack of communication from the attorney. Same for real estate agents. It's a lack of communication. And so if you can communicate, you are likely to keep yourself out of court, which is always a goal. So yeah, for sure.
And Brent, you mentioned this, but I think this idea that, well, they would never buy it if they knew this. So we can't tell them, just forgets this idea that, no, I think you missed this idea that We're all adults. And when you respect and treat me like an adult and tell me what's going on, I like that, you know,
Yep.
and that makes me feel like, okay, all the cards are on the table and I can do it or not do it, but I don't feel like anybody's hiding anything from me.
Yeah, I mean, even having the conversation, you understand we're investors, we're buying this to make a profit on this property. Do you have any problems with that? Do you have any questions with that? You know, no, yes, whatever it is. And then we answer those questions. Do you have a problem if we make a lot of profit on this? No. As long as I get what I want, I'm good. Right. And people think that like there's some sort of like sneaky way to negotiate with property owners. There's not. You just tell them exactly what it is and they respect you way more for it. And if they don't, they should sell to somebody else. Simple as that. There's too many opportunities. There's too many opportunities to not disclose everything and have an unbelievable purchase agreement that lays out everything that's going to happen from this time till the time that you get your money on this or the time that you close on this property.
Yeah, it's not going to be scandalous to them to find out that you're in this to make money.
No.
Right? I mean, that's what everybody's here to do.
Yeah.
So give us some ideas. What can real estate investors do to improve their communication skills?
So those four things are really important: the condition, timeline, motivation, price. So if you use that as the skeleton of the conversations, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable, and you're going to understand that there's a few ways to ask questions to try to find out that information. So as long as you have a couple different ways to ask the question about price, right? If you had a magic wand and waved it over the property and it totally made this property totally fixed up and brand new and totally renovated, how much do you think that it would cost to do that? Right? And then what do you think it would be worth? Okay, great. And then, we need to make a profit. So we need to be at this price. There's different ways, right? Just asking them what price they want for the property, asking them, if I can get you your money in the next 14 days or 30 days, does that work for you to pull out the timeline? So having a couple different ways to ask those questions. And then I think active listening is very important. Not anything crazy, but if they're talking to you on the phone and you're just asking questions with a flat tone, it sounds like an interrogation. It doesn't sound like a conversation. And so they're going to put up their force field. They're going to build up, kind of a resistance to the questions that you're asking. So making sure that you're actively listening and they understand that you are listening and really understanding what they're saying is important. Making sure that you actually answer questions. It's like this old school, like 80s, 90s thing where if somebody asks you a question, you just hit them back with a question, right? Well, how much will you give me for your property? Well, how much do you want? It's nonsense. It doesn't work. Like, I don't know if if society just got like sensitive to it or whatever else, but it just doesn't work. Answer the question, ask a question, stand up when you're talking to people, have a smile on your face. How about opening up the windows or turning the lights on when you're having conversations? Nothing drives me crazier than people that are trying to buy a property and they're sitting in a dark room, scrunched over, having a conversation with the property owner. It's just not going to go well. Stand up, have some energy, have some enthusiasm, and have certainty and likability when you're on the phone. If you have certainty and likability, you're going to communicate better. And that comes with reps. It comes with doing the work.
As technology has grown over the years, I feel like, especially in our practice, it's taken away a lot of the old school, just verbal communication. I hate emails, right? Because somebody sends me an email, and as a lawyer, I can answer that verbally in about 30 seconds. But in an email that I have to assume it could be used or published at some time, I got to vet through this. And now we're talking about a big, long email, and it's expensive and everything else. So in some respect, I'm always telling folks, let's just get on the phone and work through this. Do you have, in talking through the communication, you mentioned earlier in the episode, starting out knocking on doors. I know that can be realistically difficult, but is there one form that you prefer above all others, all things being equal?
Yeah, I think just picking up the phone and calling people. Just calling people and having a conversation with them and see when they're planning on selling their property. It's been the most effective. It's been the longest lasting form. It's like, oh, well, you can do text message marketing and you can do pay-per-click and you could do all these other things. And that's great if you have a budget. But if you don't have a budget, you're going to have to be in hustle season. You know what I mean? You're going to have to find those opportunities if you can't invest a bunch of money into your marketing. So I think starting out and as a staple, as long as you're having conversations and making offers with people, you're going to win. And that's what I see across the board in any market, in any whether it be a big market or a major market. If you have more conversations, you're going to win. That's what it comes down to. So how are you going to do that? You either pay for people to call you, or you be proactive and you use your time, talent, and skills and abilities to go and reach out to them.
Has the shifting market conditions at all modified or changed your pillars or your script on what you try to focus on, or is it just necessitated the need or more of a need for communication?
Yeah, it's amazing because the people that didn't build the skills, that were just locking up properties and then sending them out, and you didn't really have to have skills in negotiating. You didn't really have to have skills to understand, is this offer is a cash offer or creative offer, or that referring this to an agent the best for this property owner. If people that didn't have the skills are gone, guys, they're gone. Because they locked up too many deals that they couldn't sell. They probably got over their skis with their expenses because they're making fast, quick money and not really building any foundations to their business. And so we have seen that although there's still other competing offers on the properties that we're negotiating with, it's been less. It's been significantly less because you have to have skills in this market.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've seen a lot of real estate investors that were born in the boom and had it easy, right? Everybody, that's where they all ran to it during the boom and had it easy, but hadn't honed basically these skills that get you through every market and make you effective.
Yeah, I feel like, the greatest generation, they went through the World Wars and World War II, and they were grizzled, and they had, I don't know, they just felt stronger, right? They're more grateful for like waking up every single day. I feel like if you were in real estate through the 2007 to 9 to 10 to 11, you're built stronger. You understand that there has to be some substance to the business and a foundation to really build off of, and that's skills. And so if you develop the skills during that time, not to say that you can't develop them now, you certainly can. It just, there was a time there from 2020 to 2022, or maybe even 19 to like mid 2022, where you didn't have to have any skills. You just had to put a property under contract, put it out there, and it would sell. And now that's changed. And now the people that had the skills are lasting and are really reaping the benefits. I mean, this is the best start to a year that we've ever had.
Now, you mentioned knowing your M buyer is important at the very end of the transaction. How does the communication shift when you flip? I would imagine it has to be somewhat significant when you're dealing with maybe it's just a fix and flip and you're going to sell it to a conventional buyer versus a buyer who you're assigning the contract to, somebody who's buying the right to purchase the property. How significant is that difference in communication?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it was wonderful selling to hedge funds, right? That was like the easiest deal of all time. And then they stopped buying, or they changed their buy box. And so it's really a delicate balance that you have to have, like healthy tension with your cash buyers. They have to respect you, but you have to respect them as well, in a sense of, it might not be the highest offer we get, but I know that this buyer is actually going to close. And so really building a core relationships with like 30 or 50 people that have been doing this business for a while, that communicate really well, that can make quick decisions, they understand what they're looking at, is critical. It's absolutely critical. And that was something that was a big shift, because we were just sending it out to like 9,000 buyers and seeing who would give us the most, and it would get closed. But as hard money lenders got tighter, as the cash buyers that were buying and flipping kind of got stuck in those flips, they couldn't sell them in the first weekend that they put them on the market. So that really slowed everything down. You really see who the real players are and it was awesome. You know, it was like a nice filter to see who's going to be in this business a long time, and build those great relationships with them.
Well, Brent, we really appreciate you being with us. Tell our listeners where they can find you, how they can watch you, get in touch with you.
Awesome. We put a lot of love and time and attention onto our YouTube channel. It's just Brent Daniels on YouTube. Wholesaling Inc. podcast, Wholesale Hotline podcast, 2 podcasts there that should be downloaded and listened to for any real estate investors. And then wholesalinginc.com. We've got a academy there that's got a bunch of complimentary downloads that people can use if they want scripts and some different guides on how to build this business. We put a lot of attention in there as well.
Well, thanks again for being with us. We really appreciate it. Brent Daniels, everybody, go check him out. His YouTube channel is awesome. You learned a ton there about wholesaling, and hope we can do it again.
Thank you, guys. This has
Thanks,
been
Brent.
awesome. You guys are phenomenal. And thank you for those contracts.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. With that, everybody, that is our show. Make sure to join us next week. Title of the show, Check All the Boxes, What Your Real Estate Contract Needs. We'll be having guests Paul and Adam Vincent. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a good one.
Have a good day, everyone.